Good evening. Welcome to Psychic Holistic Spotlight. Tonight we have the privilege of interviewing a man that's usually a host on the program, Bill Hannon. How are you this evening, Bill?
Good evening, Gary. Yes, I'm doing fine.
Well, tonight Bill will be discussing citizenship in regard to sovereignty and the citizenship of the people of the United States. Bill, would you please tell us what led you to this study and what you've derived from your studies over an extended period of time?
Sure. I basically started as a result of my work doing energy work, healing work. I would work with people, and you're working in a situation where families are kind of behind the eight ball because of medical expenses and whatnot. I would help them herbally. I would help them with hands-on healing, body talk, Reiki, whatever. And you kind of get to know the people, and you see the problems they're having financially. Credit card issues as well as foreclosures. And through the use of doing some studies, I realized that I could write letters for people, and basically I was able to stop foreclosures just by writing letters, addressing them to the banks through the lawyers, addressing them at the lawyers. And one gentleman, I helped him out starting in 2011, and he's still in his house, and I'm still involved with him right now. I help people with student loan issues and whatnot. And as a result of this, I realized that there's actually a dual citizenship within the United States. And that's actually not just some off and left field approach. This has actually been discussed and ruled upon by the Supreme Court. So we have a situation where most people are, without realizing it, you could be a United States citizen or you could be an American. And
most people are
United
States citizens, correct?
Most people consider yourself citizens, U.S. citizens. And the reason for this is you kind of bring yourself into that by whenever you sign to a license, a driver's license. Most people check off U.S. citizen. I don't. Are you a resident? Again, that's a federal determination. The word resident actually has a very confining definition.
Legal definition.
And you're basically domiciled where you live as a flesh and blood man. But if you're a U.S. citizen, you can be considered a resident. And what that does is it brings you within their rules and regulations. That's basically how I got involved with it, was helping people with letters and whatnot, and then expanding on that. And I just saw things that weren't right, and by doing this research and whatnot, which was, I really had to validate for myself.
Right.
Yeah. You also took classes.
Well,
Law classes to better understand.
Right. I did go to
law.
CCRI, and I realized that it's a great foundation to have to take the contract classes and the writing classes and whatnot. And I do use them as part of my foundation, but I basically look at it from the point of view that it's who do you think you are? And are you a U.S. citizen who basically brings yourself into the jurisdiction of the United States government? Or are you an American, basically a national citizen who is a citizen of the state? And you have a lot more latitude between considering yourself a national citizen or a state citizen.
So you're bound by state laws.
Well, yes and no. You see, that's the nice thing about the country that we were blessed with, is that we are a republic. And what a republic means is that the contract between the federal government and the state government, which is the Constitution, is something that actually only concerns the federal government and the state government. It initially started that the state was formed by the counties of the state, which were formed by the municipalities. The counties were formed by the municipalities, who were formed by the people. So you have the people who create the municipalities or cities, who create the corporation of the state. And right now what you have is an entirely different setup due to the Act of 1871. Now,
Is that when we went from a republic to a corporation?
that's correct. That's correct. And most people.
Repeat that, because a lot of people would not believe that. What did
Right.
I hear?
Right. So basically what happened was after the Civil War, it was an involved process where the Congress, the Senate, dissolved itself at the beginning of the Civil War and was never really put together again. It is still laying there. The original government is still laying there. But what happened is a corporation came in and formed a corporation called the United States of America, who now basically set up that corporation as a mirror to the previous government, the organic 1776 government. And so this may sound outlandish to people. They may say that that's ridiculous, but don't take my word for it. Just look up the Act of 1871. And you'll find that basically the Vatican and the monarchy and a few well-placed families from Europe basically formed the corporation, the United States of America, which now whenever you see the name, it's always in capital letters. That tells you it's a corporation. Right. So even the use of, changing a few words in the name of the Constitution from the corporation of the United States, to the corporation or the Constitution of the United States.
Yeah.
So logistically, when that took place and we became a corporation and we dissolved the republic, so to speak, because of the corporations, what did that constitute in the big picture as to our sovereignty and our liberties?
Right.
In the big picture now.
Right. Well, that's what I want people to understand is that the big picture has never changed. I mean, we on this panel have a fairly solid spiritual understanding and background, and we realize our connection to Source, to God. And basically, we were told that you shall have no masters before me. And now you have a situation where you have the corporation trying to set itself up as a master over you. All right, and they try to control every aspect of your life. And so if you realize when you take the Pledge of Allegiance, when people say it, I pledge allegiance to the flag, to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands. So the flag represents the republic. It doesn't represent the democracy. And what's the difference between a republic and a democracy? The guidelines that were set up by the Bill of Rights to guarantee your personal freedoms were basically they were a wholly inspired document, as I remember in
history studies when I was in high school that they said that it was a wholly inspired divine document, and that's what guided the founding fathers in writing the document. So it seemed to me that when they changed it from a republic to a corporation, they were trying to change the way that the foundation of the way that we actualized our divine connection to all that is.
Right. So what you have with the republic, that's just a difference between, to understand what a republic is basically you have the guarantees of that contract between the state and the federal government to protect you. And if anything deviates from that, you don't have to pay attention to it, because the Supreme Court has ruled that if there's anything contrary to the Constitution, it's null and void. Now, when they went to a democracy, a democratic republic, basically you have to just consider what a democracy is. It's the rule of the highest amount of people that vote for a thing, such as mob rule is one way you can look at it. Another way is you look at it from the point of view of two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. You know, there's not much choice there, you know? But the thing is that the way that they set it up was that you could have the democracy and it applies to everybody unless it violates anything that's in the Republican form of government. And I think that's I prefer a republic, of course, because, you know, I see myself as the, where you have source as my contractors with source, you know, my contractors with God. And, you know, that's basically how I developed my understanding, was through helping people. And it's gotten to the point now where I've been able to help people with court cases with traffic violations and stuff like that. So that's basically, I just want people to understand that if you look at it from the point of view that you are the vehicle, with your source spirit being the soul within that vehicle, nobody has control over that vehicle except you and your relationship with your maker. And so they've done a very good job over the past 30 or 40 years of trying to disavow any connection to a spiritual source. Because this way, when you have atheism or agnostics, you don't have a situation where you feel comfortable in expressing your point of view because you have nothing to base it on.
Yeah.
But if you have that relationship and you can say, hey, listen, this is my understanding, I put it in front of you, you can rebut it, and you have to show me how you rebut it, or my understanding stands.
And so what happens if they, say for instance, you get a speeding ticket and you have to sign when the police officer issues you the ticket, and your signature goes on the ticket, which confirms that you're in violation. When you take that as a sovereign to a court of law, how does that constitute the difference in your responsibility, being in the fact that you don't honor the corporation and you honor the republic? How does that work out in the court of law?
Well, you know, it's a nice thing. They've given you remedy. Everything that they set up with the rules and regulations, they have to realize that there has to be a remedy for you to be able to bring up and to stand behind. A good way of making them understand that is by whenever you sign any type of documentation, you sign it without prejudice. And without prejudice means you can rely on your natural standing as a flesh and blood man rather than being a corporation. You know, you look at your license, you look at your credit cards, you look at your bills from utilities and whatnot. and your name is always in capital letters. It's called style. It's not the way that they spell it. It's style. And what that style does is it's evidence that you are agreeing to play by their rules. But the thing is, when you sign that contract, you sign it upper, lower case letters. You sign it what they call Christian appellation. And what you've done is you signed that with an understanding that you did sign it as a flesh and blood man, but they converted your name to a corporation. And now what they do is they now try to hold the thumb over you because you have this understanding that you're under their control, they have authority over you because you're agreeing to it.
But they don't ever inform you that the way
No,
that you
that's why the
actually-
contract actually is not valid. It's a void contract.
Right,
Because whenever you have a contract between two or more parties,
right.
there has to be a complete and full understanding amongst all parties and consideration. Now, you're paying for a license, well, what do you get in return? You know, is it the privilege to drive? Or can you drive without a license anyways?
And so
No.
how does that work out for you as a sovereign? Do you have to have a driver's license based on
Well,
the law as
well,
it
you know,
is,
you look
quote?
back and try to understand. I mean, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, I mean, you know, they didn't have to have a license to hook the horses up to the buggy and travel into town and whatnot. You know, there has to be some type of control for vehicles, for identifying vehicles in case there's a mishap or hit and run or something like that. But to actually register your car and get plates that have the state of whatever state you're in is a way that you're kind of bringing yourself again into their control. There are a lot of people that do have notification on their vehicles, private property, not for hire.
What about license plates?
Well, these same people do not have license plates, or they have a license plate that says private on it or something like that.
So does that exonerate, say if you, that car and that person was driving and they were breaking a lane change or they were
Sure.
driving too fast, does
Sure.
that constitute, does that give the right to say to a state police officer to stop you if you're a sovereign as opposed to someone under the corporation?
Right. Well, you know, most people, of course, are concerned about situations like that. They don't want to violate rules and regulations, and most people don't.
Right.
You know, whether they consider themselves a flesh and blood man or a corporate citizen. But when you have a situation where somebody pulls you over, you have to realize that you gave them the authority to pull you over by registering the car because you have a state vehicle, basically.
Plus, that was constituted on the fact that you gave them the bill of sale and proved through the registration process?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's interesting you bring that up. You know, a lot of people aren't aware that when you bring a vehicle to a authority and you register it, that you are basically giving that state your property, and in exchange they give you a plate to put on your what you call your vehicle. But its actuality is the state Supreme Court has the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that basically if you own your vehicle, you own your automobile, your car. That's your personal property. They've actually determined that your car is personal property. It's household goods. And so the thing is that when you register your car, you're giving them your car, and in return, you don't even get the certificate of title. You don't even get the title, you get a certificate of title.
So do they actually end up owning the vehicle under the state law because you sign over the title to the DMV?
Is this what's behind impound laws?
Well,
How
it's
they can
actually,
take stuff?
it's actually behind, that's the reason why they can pull your vehicle over, is because it's a state vehicle. It says it right on the license plate. But, I'm not trying to get mired into this so much as trying to establish that, you have remedy. It's right there in the law. You don't have to be a fanatic or some whack-a-nut who's going to argue with everybody about everything. You have to get an understanding, and I don't mean understanding in the legal definition. I mean Webster's definition of understanding. Because if you go into a venue where they are using different language, when they say, do you understand, it means, do you stand under me? And it says it right inside Black's Law Dictionary. So the thing is that I want people to realize that if you feel comfortable with who you are, and you understand that your relationship is between you and your master, that you do not have to avail yourself to any other authority. And the best thing to do to give yourself remedy is to do your own research, and there's plenty of it out there right now, and basically put together a letter and send it to the Attorney General, send it to the DMV. This is my understanding, this is what I believe. I'll give you 30 days to rebut it. They don't rebut it, send them another one. Say, hey, listen, you may have misplaced that letter I sent you. This is my understanding, this is what I believe is true. I'll give you another 5 days to respond. And, if they don't respond to that, basically you have created a legal document because you should have had it notarized before you sent it. You should send a certified mail. And then what you do is you put it in a package and you have it notarized by the Secretary of State, not notarized, there's another term for it, by the Secretary of State, and then you file it at your town hall. And when you do that, you're basically giving yourself a bulletproof protection from being in a situation where you can't defend yourself verbally. It should never come down to any type of force.
If they decide that that's inadequate and they do come after you based on being a sovereign and not part of the corporation,
right?
Can they be sued for false arrest or harassment or anything like that in the big picture as far as what constitutes?
If you have an understanding where you've done the process like I just said, and it's a little more involved than that, but the thing is that basically what you're doing is you're stating, this is my belief. You can rebut it. If you can, just cite what your rebuts are involved with, and then as far as going after them, if you've created a package where you basically have said, this is the way things are from my belief, you didn't rebut them.
Right.
He who does not deny agrees.
Right.
And the thing is, again, you don't want to put yourself in a position, you never argue with somebody who's trying to enforce a action against you. You just basically sign any documentation without prejudice, and then you do it through the court system. And this is how, you do that 2 or 3 times, they're not going to want to do anything against you because they know they're leaving themselves open to liability. So. And
what would be the best ways to apply this? I can see that you might not want to pay for registrations, and you might feel those would be appropriate actions.
Right. Well, the whole idea, you have to keep in mind that after the Revolutionary War, when Ben Franklin and I think it was John Hayes, went over there and they signed the Treaty of Paris in Paris with the. They had a body politic, a group of people that represented the King George, and that treaty was signed. Basically, the king said, "Well, now the inhabitants of America have the same rights as I." Oh. We don't have that now because of the slowly taking away rights through legislation. And I mean, you look back 50, 60 years ago, 40 years ago, and what we considered our birthright is right now being controlled by municipalities and state governments. And
well, even things we've paid, like Social Security, are being called, entitlements.
Right, yeah. Right.
That's insane.
Right, of course, because you've been paying that, and even then the Supreme Court has ruled that your Social Security payments are basically another income tax.
Yeah.
So this is a way that they try to more or less skirt the issue of responsibility for what people think that their Social Security payments have gone for.
So as a sovereign, you are not responsible to pay Social Security or taxes?
It's the thing is, once you realize where this goes, and again, we've kind of gone away from what I was hoping to approach with this as far as getting down into the nitty-gritty of what's actually happening with the system nowadays. But I just want people to understand that once you understand who you are, and that you have your authority through your source, you don't have to allow yourself to be controlled by people who, as Christ has said, "Woe unto ye, you Pharisees and Sadducees. You have as much chance of getting into the kingdom of heaven as a camel through the eye of a needle." Because you have taken the language of the common man and used it against him. So, that's a paraphrase, of course, but basically that's what he was trying to make everybody aware of, that
We need to wrap it up.
through the regulations that they're doing, it's unfortunate that most people accept what they see on TV as the, we got 1 minute, that we have basically a lot more authority as once you understand you have the potential of standing on your own 2 feet and asking for guidance.
And so we need to wrap it up, but let me ask you this one last question. How can people get in touch with you if they have interest in setting into motion becoming a sovereign and getting away from the corporation?
The most important thing they can do is do their own research. And the most important way to understand things are to go, there's a gentleman by the name of Carl Miller. He's a combat veteran from the Vietnam War. This guy was, I'm trying to think, Apocalypse Now is actually based on his story. And he helps people like this all the time. And basically, Carl Miller, Constitution Man, is one source they can go to, as well as doing your own search as U.S. citizen v. American. You're not looking for a battle between the two. What you want to do is understand the difference between a U.S. citizen and an American. And there's organizations out there like SEDM, S-E-D-M. Just a lot of people out there who have put a lot of effort into helping people understand who they are.
Well,
In these changing times.
we're going to wrap it up now, but
Right.
thank you very much, Bill, for your expertise in this matter.
Right.
And we hope that it will empower the audience and the listening audience to take a deeper look at their sovereignty and the lack thereof.
Right.
And their role in
spirit.
spirituality.
Yeah.